Greetings. We here at PLD Projects want to make it known that we wholeheartedly support the strikes by both SAG-AFTRA and the WGA against the greedy corporate studio executives. It is a fight for basic human decency. Our reviews, discussions, and critiques are in no way supporting the studios, merely dissecting the art and how these wonderful actors and writers continue to influence us on a daily basis. We thank you. PLD Projects presents Holy Snokes, a Star Wars podcast, featuring PLD and Matty Gunner. May the Force be with you, always. What's up, everybody? Welcome to PLD Projects. Welcome to our episode of Holy Snokes. Back in the saddle again. I am your host, PLD, and with me, as always, is my trusty co-pilot. He doesn't like when I call him a sidekick, so I won't call him a sidekick. He's my co-pilot. Matty Gunner, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, sidekicks in where I come from, where I'm in, are a completely different thing. So, and they hurt a lot. So
that's fair. That's fair.
So yeah, being your Wookiee, I guess, which I've had like those side tangent, I guess. I mean, well, so we got a big discussion ahead of us, so I just want to get all my tangents out quick. I've been feeling like I should cut this off or cut it shorter for a while now.
Oh my God.
But I feel like kind of Samson. If I cut it, I'll lose my source of power.
It's hard to imagine you. I mean, I'm going to always support you here. Do what you do. Do what you feel is right, of course.
I haven't had short hair since I was 14. I used to have like the Peaky Blinders, like the like Boardwalk Empire style, like long, slick at the top and like shaved at the sides.
Wow, it would. That's hard for me to imagine. I gotta tell you, I don't ever seen a picture of you that young. Wow, it really would be hard for me to imagine you without your hair. But you know what? Sometimes things gotta change, and sometimes you gotta be the one to make the change happen.
I'll probably chicken out of it, but
okay, that's fair. You would go from aren't you a little short for a Wookiee to being white Lando because you're that smooth. I don't know. Maybe what to say. I don't know. Well, anyway, folks, we got an interesting idea this week. Thank you to one Matty Gunner. It's a big, obviously, with the big release of Barbenheimer this past weekend, or I don't even know where time is, but a construct recently. Of course, I haven't seen Barbie yet, but I did see Oppenheimer and was blown away. I'm a big Christopher Nolan fan. I feel like he's somewhat polarizing in our community a little bit. I think a lot of people give him his due, but some people don't like some of the things. He's like emotional, whatever. But I've always loved Nolan. I've always been kind of a Nolan fanboy. So when you brought up the idea of looking at this conversation between Christopher Nolan and George Lucas from 2011 from the DGA, it definitely sparked my interest because I remember hearing about this and I remember wanting to watch it. And then for whatever reason, I just never did. I never got around to it. I kind of forgot about it. So when you said, let's watch this together as a pre-Disney Star Wars, where Star Wars is he's just kind of thinking of maybe selling, probably at this point, developing the sequel, his own version of the sequel trilogy. Sitting down with Christopher Nolan, who is one of the most well-known, iconic modern filmmakers. I mean, really, he's in a rarefied air. Maybe him, maybe Villeneuve,
Cameron.
Cameron's still even of the old days. I mean, Nolan started like the turn of the century, 2000. As far as like modern guy, I mean, because Cameron's modern enough as well because of Avatar potentially, but kind of a different era. I kind of feel like Cameron's more began back in the 70s, 80s with Spielberg and Lucas kind of thing. Nolan's definitely more of this generation, but it's very rare people have the length of time in which he's been a high quality filmmaker. Even Villeneuve's only been really the 2010s, so to speak, as far as things go. I know he did some work in Canada before that. We had a couple other young and bright filmmakers who made their marks, but like, Jordan Peele's out there, but he's only made a couple of films, so we're still kind of working towards that potentially. But either way, he's definitely one of the most modern, iconic filmmakers who is definitely definitely veered towards science fiction quite a few times. So it's definitely interesting to hear these two have this conversation about Star Wars and everything else. So with the adaptation of Oppenheimer and this like being kind of a weird in between times, we're waiting for Ahsoka to pop up in a couple of weeks. This is a good time to do this. I think a lot of fun to have this happen. So I'm very excited and very thankful that you push this as a possible topic.
Yeah, and it obviously if we'd have still been doing class action, we probably would have done Barbie, but found a way to do Barbie versus Oppenheimer. But a couple of things I want to say before we start on this. I feel like the conversation, I feel like to sit George down for an hour, there was only one that they could do. It's Christopher Nolan, because I feel like their styles of filmmaking are very similar. I feel like Nolan took a lot from the George Lucas playbook of what can I do to push the techniques of filmmaking to a new level, to the point where they have created 70 millimeter IMAX footage and black and white IMAX footage for Oppenheimer. And the second, this is not a review of Oppenheimer, but that movie genuinely changed my life and my worldview the same way Star Wars did when I was a kid.
Oh, all right.
I put it in the PLD Project's Patreon chat where we talk about movies. This was a turning point. Watching that movie was a turning point in my life.
Wow.
No joke. Like I went to watch it in the Science Museum in London, and I've kept the ticket. I kept the paper ticket because I'm like, that is a day in my life I will never, ever, ever forget. Because after watching the movie, we were walking through the halls, and like all these advancements and creations and inventions that we have made as humanity, and none of them compare to that.
Wow.
And then
no, that's great.
I was like walking through, like kind of like my head down, just in a stupor. And when I looked up for the first time, I saw a sign that said, "How far can we go?" And it terrified me. I was like, there's the balance there of how far can we go? And that's such a core thing to Star Wars, of like, you have this power, this unlimited power, and like choosing to use it for evil. And then you have the story of Anakin Skywalker, who is this brilliant young soul his gifts were manipulated into the use for evil.
Right.
And then he was essentially just cast aside.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I drew a lot of parallels between the two.
Yeah, I didn't do that, to be completely honest. I did love the movie. Honestly, it was my favorite movie of the year so far, by far. Definitely was a return to form for Nolan, for me. I mean, I had kind of, after Interstellar, which I absolutely loved, I was a little cool on Dunkirk. And Tenet, I really kind of grew to like the second time I
didn't like it.
I know you didn't. A lot of people
I'm sorry, Jarby. The only thing I like about it was that Richard Egg Jarby's in it. But
yeah, that's right. That's awesome.
That's it.
That's not a joke. He was in one of the guys who were dressed in black, storming the stadium as well, or the arena. I did enjoy it the second time I saw it. Definitely thought it. I mean, even Christopher Nolan has come out recently and said he kind of lost the plot a little bit, as far as lost the track. Like it was a little bit too confusing, a little bit too heady, as far as the time travel stuff goes. Which I get. That's what kind of got most people a little bit confused. But this one really, I think, returned him to the heights that he can do. This might be, I mean, some people are saying this is his greatest, his masterpiece, his greatest piece of all time. It might be up there. I mean, I think I still like Interstellar more, but I have a soft spot in my heart for that one specifically. I still like The Prestige more, I think, but overall, it's right up there. It's definitely right up there.
I don't know if it's his masterpiece, because I think every artist pushes themselves to new heights with each project they go. But I feel like this is the one he was supposed to make. And I'm not a massive Nolan fan. I respect his abilities as a filmmaker. Some of the things that he said in interviews about being the one to save the cinema. Sorry, bro. Tom Cruise did that, not you. Suck it. But I'll just come out and say, and then we can move on to the news. That movie genuinely changed my life.
I mean, that's awesome. I mean, that's awesome. So when film does that, it's a really special thing. So I really appreciate you bringing it forth here on the show. And I'm happy for you about that, because that's a really cool thing to have. That's a really cool thing to experience. I will say, bring it back to Holy Snokes a little bit. I would love to see Christopher Nolan do a Star Wars film. I don't know if he could ever It's always kind of interesting thing trying to get the free reign that kind of director would need and the kind of director would want compared to try to fit into a Star Wars box. And Lucasfilm wants to give him a lot of, I don't know, but at the same time, kind of feel like there's a couple of directors, Nolan being one of them, that you would kind of go, you know what, do what you need to do in Star Wars, and we'll just make sure at least that it semi fits canon. That's all.
Well, how about this? At the end of the conversation between him and George, when it's all said and done, we'll decide if we feel Chris Nolan is one to do it.
Of course, the last thing I heard was he actually kind of interested in James Bond next, which would be interesting. I mean, I kind of would like to see him go a little bit more back into something to see. He loves Bond. Did the Batman trilogy, obviously, but he also did some other stuff as well. So we do something like that, where we can do Batman 1, something else, Batman 2, something like that kind of thing, and do maybe a Bond movie and something else, and then a Star Wars movie and something. That'd be really cool to see or do. But we'll find out.
One thing, and yeah, this would be my very, very, very last comment. One thing that I've noticed about Nolan is his movies, he likes to push the human spirit to make choices, really dissect into the human spirit and the choices, and more importantly, consequences.
Yeah.
And I feel like that could be a great thing to explore in Star Wars.
I would love to see Nolan. Honestly, my initial pitch, and I'll save it more till after. Well, I'll save it till after. I have a possible pitch for what I wouldn't mind seeing Nolan tackle. But before we do this interview that we're going to listen to together, watch together, and comment on together, we do have a little bit of news to talk about it as we go along. Of course, I curate all my news from Star Wars News Net. I'm not a paid promoter of them, but I do like to shout out because they're my favorite site as far as curating news. They always give me the best news. And the best outlook on news, whether it's real bullshit or So.
Sorry, I just had to cover up the brand of my drink there because they're not a paid sponsor yet.
That's right, not a paid sponsor. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Speaking of sponsors, there might be something coming up in PLD Products future, but we'll talk about that when it comes to fruition as well later on. But I put that little tease out there. All right, the first article that I wanted to talk about was an article from a few months ago, a week ago or so. The Acolyte stars describing the fight choreography and described also how it brought more aliens and Jedis and less green screen onto the screen for Acolyte. I guess this part was partially at Celebration, but they released this as an interview. Now, there's a lot in this interview to like. I'm only going to touch base on a few of the quotes, but if you want more,
you have my attention. You said fight choreography and Acolyte. You have my attention.
Oh, I know. I definitely know that. One of the quotes were from Manny Jacinto, and he put the fight sequences as Manny Jacinto puts it, the fight sequences seek to satisfy fans of The Phantom Menace and Duel of the Fates. If you loved that sequence with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, I think you're going to enjoy the show. That's a pretty high bar. I gotta say, it's a pretty high bar.
That's a very high bar.
Here's another high bar. Charlie Barnett continued on that. Charlie Barnett says, I will say, too, not to shade, but we have a lot more tangible physical moves than I saw in that fight. As badass as it is, there's a lot more grounded work that goes into our stunt training and our stunt performances. We have an awesome stunt team, too. Doing so much without cables, without CGI, without a lot of effects makes the fight seem so much more visceral. I know I've been hit on the head a couple of times.
Interesting.
I think throw it out there.
That is pretty. I'm curious to see how they do it because I know a lot of the training goes into the weapons and the choreography with lightsabers.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that more grounded. I mean, I'm no weapons expert. Hand to hand, sure, I could talk about all day. But I think with the rise of movies like John Wick, where the action is now a lot more realistic,
right,
and a lot more grounded, and a lot more you could actually learn how to do it. I'm curious to see how that goes in with, say, using force powers and using lightsabers. It could look good, but my thing with these things is always the editing. How is it edited? This is my big thing. I hate most modern fight scene editing. Where it's all cut up and chopped up and super fast. And it's because a lot of these editors don't allow the action to tell the story. They just want yeah, exactly. You want to let it breathe. You want, a lot of these editors are just like, okay, get the cool moment, cut it in. Don't see anything that like leading up to it or the result of it. Just cut all the cool moments together and let it go. It's like, no, fights tell stories.
Right.
It's a dance between two people. Like one of my coaches always said, you will never know another person more until you fight them, until you get into a fight with them, because that's when like you develop a respect for each other above all else. And it's just like, let the action tell the story. So that's my only like
caveat.
Please don't screw that up. Please don't.
Fortunately, do that. I have no commentary on that so far. Nobody talked about that, but I know what you're saying. I actually agree. I definitely agree with you to point. But they are saying the right thing. It's kind of funny you mentioned the hand-to-hand versus the lightsaber and everything else, because Daphne Keene was actually quoted later on in that same interview, kind of touching on that. She said, even she should have a quote. Even the way the stunts have been coordinated come from an Asian background. All the fight training we've gone through is so heavily influenced by samurai and martial arts. There's a lack of guns, which personally, as someone who loves fighting and stunts and stuff, I love, because it gives you that body-to-body choreography, that dance feeling. It actually looks like a real fight as opposed to I just point and I shoot, which is kind of an easy cop-out in a way. We have a lot of sabers, and Chris Cohen and Mark Ginther and Darren Knopp have choreographed all these wonderful, wonderful stunts.
That's who's on the team, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's visually stunning. It's visually stunning. We watched some stuff the other day, and it was just gorgeous. And then we have a really bunch of fights as well where there are no sabers. It's also really fun and does look gritty and real. It feels like a fight. So I don't know. I'm not big in the stunt choreography world. You seem to have a bit of attachment. Is that a good thing with those people on the team?
I follow quite a lot of that team on Instagram, and I see like some of like their training sessions and stuff. And they are very good. They are very good. They're like one of the top stunt teams over here. So
good. Awesome. That feels good to me. All right. That's great. The last bit of news from that, last bit quote I have also from Charlie Barnett. This is a response to the fans and what they've been calling for. I, even as a fan, have been asking for more aliens, more Jedi, more tangible worlds, and more builds, less green screen. Just knowing Leslie being a playwright, being based around structure, she wanted to build all of that into one production and give that to the fans. So thank you. That's a lot to live up to, and I hope that we can live up to it. Which is kind of cool. I've been everyone to complain about like the less aliens and things like that. But to hear somebody going that route, trying to push that forward, I think is a good thing. I think that's always been the best of Star Wars. We have those kind of like those weird moments in there. There's enough of those weird things in there. I know the best of environmental, they always try to push for the 80% familiar, 20% fantasy to kind of like make up Star Wars. I do feel like we've been lacking a little bit of that 20%. They've encountered a lot of humans, a lot of that volume stuff. They got a little bit. I think the volume is a wonderful thing. Don't get me wrong. I do think that people complaining about too much volume, I think there is a happy medium. Let's put it that way. I think sometimes you can overuse it, but sometimes it's a great tool. Doesn't mean the tool is bad. I just got to find that perfect balance, and some shows find it better than others. And if this show is finding a good balance between the real and the green screen, then that's going to be a bonus, I think.
I think at the minute we know, unfortunately, because we are so into movies and how they're made, we know how the sausage gets made, and we're so into it. We can spot these things a lot easier than, say, the average Joe can. I think if we sat an average Joe down in front of Obi-Wan Kenobi, where I think respectfully the uses of the volume are a bit more limited.
Right.
That obviously there were constraints and everything on how much they could use and how many people could be in there. But I think if you sat average Joe down, they probably wouldn't know if it was a volume or practical or anything. They wouldn't care. It's only because like we're as knowledgeable as we are that we notice things like that.
Absolutely, and that could be the case. But either way, it's an interesting story. I'm getting more and more excited about Acolyte. I can't wait for it to come out. I've heard rumors now, maybe next year, like February, March, April, somewhere around there, 2024, which could be true. Of course, with the strikes happening, they've been pushing things around, so who knows exactly what's going to happen. Although good news on that front, I will say, not that this is a strike show, but there was news from Variety that the studios and streamers have re-engaged with the writers. It's our new round of negotiations, and I'm kind of hoping it would be both. Maybe they're going to try to do one at a time, get things out of the way. That's at least a step in the right direction because you can't
divide and conquer, huh?
That could be the case. It could absolutely be the case. But at the same time, you can't stop. You can't finish a strike. You can't come together if you're not talking. So let's get talking. That's the way I look at it. At least start the process. So we'll have to see. But all right, the next bit of news we're going to discuss today. It was funny how last week we had a mention of Lando, the story, the series, the TV series, whatever, and you were quick to say not going to happen. I found it very funny that right after that, I texted you right after this came out that the news dropped from Variety.
Literally, like 2 hours after we were done recording, you sent me this message, and I was like, "Well, shit."
From Above the Line, and also from that Variety confirmed it. Lando is still in proper discussions. There's improper as far as beyond the strikes go, in proper production. But Simeons has exited. Of course, the follow-up to that story was that Simeons didn't know he exited, and that's not a great thing, Lucasfilm, if that's the case. Like, there should be definitely more communication there. Simeon has no longer attached. He found out the way everybody else found out, which is not good. But I'm going to flip over to the positive side of things is that Donald Glover and his brother, Stephen Glover, are taking over full writing duties of the series. So they are, and not only are they taking over full writing duties, what I liked about the article that I read is that Stephen and Donald pitched the idea to Lucasfilm, and Lucasfilm ate it up and ran with it. And that's why Stephen and Donald are creating it. Now, to me, also, that signifies that Donald Glover is much more committed than perhaps he was attributed to. Some people said, "Oh, he'll get to it when he gets to it, but he's so busy. Who knows what'll ever happen?" It feels like if he wants to do that with his brother, like he did Atlanta, this seems like it's moved higher up onto the queue, so to speak. So I feel like this is a good news. It still might not happen. Obviously, things in Lucasfilm and the strikes and everything else, everything's up in the air. And until something gets actually working, it's always tough to kind of go, "Oh, this is definitely going to happen now." We've had so many exits from Lucasfilm, et cetera, et cetera. But this makes me think that this is more likely to happen now than it was even like a week ago. And I'm excited about it because I like Donald and Stephen are very talented, and giving them the reins on this could be a really, really, really cool thing.
Yeah, and Donald Glover, I have got on record that I think is one of the most talented people on the face of the planet. Don't know too much about his brother, but if it runs in the family, I'm sure that the creative juices are, the creative force is strong in that family. I mean, you've only got to look at Donald Glover's resume: actor, musician, producer, writer, stand-up comedian, and he does all of these things to a very, very high level. So yeah,
he was one of the great things about Solo. He was one of the highlights. Even people who didn't like Solo were saying that he was outstanding and fit the role well and did everything perfectly well. So absolutely. Yeah, he frequently collaborates with Donald Glover. He's the head story editor, one of the writers for Atlanta, also in Guava Island, and he also did some stuff with him as far as he wrote on Saturday Night Live for the Donald Glover Childish Gambino episode. So he's been writing a lot of things with his brother. So
okay, sweet, yeah. I really like Atlanta, so I'm all for it. If we get like Atlanta and Star Wars with Lando, that'd be sweet.
Now the question to me becomes: are we continuing from Solo at all, or are we going to go in a completely new direction? I would mind a little bit of both. I would kind of like let's take a different direction, but have maybe some elements in there, maybe an appearance by Han, maybe an appearance by Kira. Although I kind of feel like they set up Solo to be like the last time that Han and Lando saw each other since before Empire Strikes Back. Like, because when she mentions the idea of, well, he must have forgot about that. But
we thought that about but we also thought that about Obi-Wan and Vader.
That's true. That could be very well true. So, all right, well, I could be sold either way. Depends on how they do it. But more than anything else, I'm excited that this is definitely still in the cards potentially. And I feel like this news is a very, very positive step forward. So cross your fingers. Let's get the strike done with, and let's get an announcement. Yeah. Okay, next story bit I want to say. I'm going to throw a little bit of a spoiler warning up there. If you want to mute your TV or your computer screen, wherever you're watching this. And if you're listening on the audio, I'd say give it 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes or so. Yeah. So
I'm going to give you a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here we go. So we're not much of spoiler hounds on this show, but I kind of felt like this was an okay spoiler to talk about, albeit with some precautions. Amazon.com put up a couple of different shirts from the official Star Wars show, and one of them was a Hera shirt. And let me see if I can find the right one now. The shirt had some verbiage on it, which definitely would be considered a spoiler for an appearance of a character on Ahsoka. Now, the reason why I don't usually like to do these at all, I usually like to keep these completely to the minimum, but I feel like this is one that has been talked about so much that even if this is a third-party write-up or if this is whatever, I don't know what you could say, but if this is the case, I feel like it's a minor spoiler. It's something that it's basically more of a confirmation of something we all thought was going to happen in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, duh.
Yeah, duh. And the product description, I'll read you. Add a little out-of-this-world style to your wardrobe with truly epic, officially licensed Star Wars graphic t-shirts, sweatshirts, and hoodies. Transport yourself to a galaxy far, far away with cool new apparel featuring Ahsoka Tano, Sabine Wren, Anakin Skywalker, Mon Mothma, and all your favorite Star Wars Ahsoka characters. Of course, the bit of news, if you didn't really catch that, Anakin Skywalker is one of your favorite Star Wars Ahsoka characters. So it does look like Hayden Christensen, in some way, shape, or form, is returning to a galaxy far, far away in this series. Now, this is something, again, this has been on the cards for a long time, even since as far back as Obi-Wan. Like they mentioned that he was going to reprise his role in Obi-Wan Kenobi and then potentially in the Ahsoka series. And we never really heard much about it. I know at one point there was an interview with Rosario Dawson, who was not always the greatest at keeping things secret. So when he asked her favorite Force ghost, she said something about Anakin Skywalker being really kick-ass Force ghost or something like that. Which we're like, wait, you only really saw him at the end of Return of the Jedi. What do you mean? What do you mean? What are you talking about? So that might be the way, that might be a precursor of what we were talking about, foreshadowing of what we were talking about. Like, where would he be? Would it be a Force ghost? Would it be a flashback to the Clone Wars era? Who knows? We don't know. But either way, again, it's a confirmation of sorts. I mean, it's not really a confirmation. This could, like I said, this could be a mistake on Amazon's part or on whoever wrote it up's part. But either way, I feel like it's going to happen. I'm excited about it. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for more Hayden, all for more Anakin, always. I do feel like there is part of me that's just like, was it some random Amazon employee that was just like, let's write down names of Star Wars characters. Who's in Star Wars? Okay, Anakin Skywalker. Let's write someone more obscure. Who's in the Mon Mothma? That seems to be a character people like. Let's write her in there. I don't know. Amazon descriptions can be very While we were talking about this at the start, before we started today, I was like, make sure you check that this is the Amazon Star Wars store, not some creator storefront. Because I'll admit, I've bought bootleg band t-shirts off of Amazon before.
Oh yeah, there's definitely bootleg stuff on, so absolutely it could be something else. But this says officially licensed Star Wars graphic t-shirts, so it does head to Star Wars store. But interesting update to this topic. I just refreshed the page, and that description is no longer there. It is now just cool new apparel featuring Ahsoka Tano, Sabine Wren, and all your favorite Star Wars Ahsoka characters.
Maybe they had a character limit.
And the plan is afoot. I don't know. It's kind of funny because like this actually news article has been on for a couple of days now since August, only since yesterday. So okay, since yesterday, but it was still up right as we began this episode today. And I just refreshed it and found it, and now it's gone. So I don't know if they like pulled it for that reason or whatever. To me,
finally some news while we're recording.
Exactly, breaking news. They're pulling it off the shelves. I don't know, but either way, interesting story. Okay, that's enough for now. It's been about 5 minutes. And I'm going to take this little spoiler thing off. We're going to be done with that as soon as I can get to the great banner. Oh, banners. That's what for. All right. We are done with spoilers. We're going to move on to the final bit of news we have today, where we watch our video and comment on that together. One of my favorite fictional pieces of Star Wars has always been the short stories that are set during the films. A lot of times they've had this actually happened in Legends as well, but they've been doing it in modern canon as well. Of course, a certain point of view from Return of the Jedi is coming out soon. I wish I had that date here. I think it's the end of the month, but
August 29th.
August 29th. That's right, for the 40th anniversary. The listing of stories is out. The authors is out. All of them are out. We're ready to go. And we're going to do a breakdown of that. Obviously, when it comes out, I think we're going to try to read that quickly or go through a couple stories and maybe, I don't know. I don't read very quickly anymore because I read a lot of stuff at once. In fact, right now I'm reading 3 Star Wars books right now. I think I'm reading The Path to Deceit, which I'm enjoying. About halfway through that, I'm reading Rise of the Lightsaber, the Inquisitor book, which is phenomenal so far. I'm only about a third of the way in, but I'm excited to see where we're going from there. I want to read. Was that the only ones I'm reading? I think it might be the all I'm reading right now. Oh no, I'm reading my older Legends book as well, which is the last of the Jedi series still, which is a lot of fun. Ferris Olden's a cool character. But either way, I'm going to go through these really quickly. A certain point of view story will feature a Moff Jerjerrod story by Imal El Mothar, a Max Rebo story by Phil Zostak, EV99 by Olivia Chada, Bib Fortuna by Kwame Mabalia, an unknown character by Thea Guanzon called Dune Sea Songs of Salt and Moonlight, Malakili, of course, the Rancor Keeper by Saladin Ahmed, Boba Fett, a story by Tara Sim, Scion, who I don't really know that character. That's one I don't really remember. Let me see who that is. Written by K.R. Rivera. I don't know. I got Scion as a Knights of the Old Republic character. I don't know if that's somebody. I don't know if it's the same Scion or who that's supposed to be. I don't remember him from the Jedi. Do you remember that character at all?
No, but I also know there's a character called Tika in Rise of the Red Blade, so it could be,
it's a possible thing. All right, that's fine. Oh, there you go. Scion is. Oh, okay. Scion. Oh, that is funny. I guess it's a new thing. 40 years later, Star Wars has finally explained its dumbest mistake. Oh, this is the guy who gets the force kick from Luke.
Jesus.
Of course they did it. Awesome. I love it.
They are reaching.
That's a way to just discuss about Stormtrooper rating your head.
That's gonna be someone's new glove shit. There's gonna be so many people cosplaying as Scion.
Absolutely.
In Tokyo.
Absolutely, that is funny as hell. All right. Moving on, we got Salacious B. Crumb by Sarah Glenn Marsh, Size Noodles by Kristen Baver.
That'll be good.
That'll be a good one. Yeah, she's a great writer. The Sarlacc by Charlie Jane Andrews. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not looking forward to that one. I don't like when they do the whole I think they did the Wampa story and the Empire Strikes Back one. They're kind of characters. Those ones aren't for me, but that's okay. And if you love it, maybe you'll love it. Your miles may vary. You may love it, and good for you. Sim Alu by Jason Fry. The Dragon Snake on Dagobah by Akemi Dawn Bowman. The one I'm looking forward to most, Obi-Wan Kenobi by Alex Jennings. Mon Mothma by Fran Wild. Lando Calrissian by Danny Delore. TK151 by Patricia A. Jackson.
Okay.
Wicket by Mary Kenny.
Wicked's getting one.
Yep. And Low Gray as well by Paula Crilly. That's cool. Nora Wexley by Suzanne Walker. That's cool. That's a cool tie-in. Cool. Commander Igar by Max Gladstone. He's the man who captured Luke Skywalker. Admiral Akbar by Jarrett J. Krozuska.
Yes.
Arvril Crinid, of course, the Green Leader by Mariaki Nijkamp. Riz by Hannah Witten. Silicate.
Riz.
Silicate by Ali Hazelwood. Core by Lamar Giles. Nanta by Sarah Kuhn. Emperor Palpatine by Livia Blake. That's cool. A Palpatine story. I like that. Unknown called Impact by Sean Williams. TK423 by Laura Pohl. Admiral Piet by Dana Schwartz, The Royal Guard, The Emperor's Red Guards by Gloria Chow, Hoyle, a track called Wolf Trap by
How
Alyssa
many are they
Wong,
doing?
Carrie and Lana, I'm almost done. Carrie and Lana by M.K. England, Wedge Antilles by Emma Miyako Condon, Unknown called The Chronicler by Danielle Page. This one got me. Written by Adam Lance Garcia, titled The Veteran, a tale about Dexter Jetster.
Brian Wood is somewhere losing his mind right now.
Absolutely. He woke up in a cold sweat. The other one I'm really looking forward to, Mike Chen, writer of Brotherhood, which actually the title of this story is also Brotherhood, Anakin Skywalker, which I'm waiting for. That's going to be a good
So
one.
wait, are they just using a chapter?
No, I think it's going to be Anakin Skywalker after.
There's nothing in Brotherhood that they could use. So weird.
Yeah, I think it's connecting the stories of Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Okay.
That's what I think. Enric Pride, which I'm looking forward to, General Pride from obviously Rise of Skywalker. Just rewatched that with my son. I love Pride in this movie. I think he's a great villain. Wish we got more of him. And finally, The Wills, Return of the Wills, because remember we had those guys in the previous one. They were kind of a fun tale. So, and that's it. That's all 40, I guess. So here we go. That's gonna be a lot of stuff to talk about when we get
40.
This out.
God damn. That's gonna tie us over for a while.
40 for 40. That's what we did. That's what they do here. So maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll just make it we'll do like one per episode kind of thing. Like one quick review on.
Isn't it 30 for? Isn't it 30 for 30?
It is, but it's 40 for 40 years.
Oh, okay.
40th anniversary. So 40.
I got it.
So. All right, that's the end of the news for today. Let's get into the meat of the podcast, the meat of potatoes. We have about an hour. This is actually a longer one, so let me get this right up there. Without further
I think we can cut off the intro when there's a lot of handshaking and schmoozing.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that definitively. Let's see. Make sure you can hear this. I'm gonna hit play real quick. Make sure you can hear it.
Yep.
Can you hear that? Okay, good. All right, let's get into it and let's move forward then. Okay, good. Right to where we need to go.
Nolan is so quintessentially English.
Yeah, it really is.
So much has been written and talked about Star Wars. We're not going to worry about any spoilers here. I'm just going to assume that everybody in the crowd knows what happens at the end of the film. But for people of my age,
I hope so.
40, there are movies before Star Wars and then there's Star Wars, and it changed absolutely everything for us since. What was around at the time that made you think that there was some context for this?
To be very honest, there was no context other than 2001, which was really science.
So everyone now complaining there was no plan.
You know, sort of first quality.
Yeah, exactly.
Time, enough money to do it however he wanted, and he was a genius. And I didn't think that anybody was going to make a better science fiction film than that. So I sort of went and began to focus on space opera, which wasn't really space opera. What I'd done is I'd gone through. I loved Saturday matinee serials when I was a kid. They were on television. These sort of all-out action picture. It had a cliffhanger after 15 minutes, and then each one was 15 minutes long, and then it was a serialized.
Way before my time.
And I really wanted to do something in that genre. Well, the original impetus was being an angry young college student. I did THX. And
Hell yeah!
It was based on the fact that we tell people we live in a miserable world. This is a parable about the way we live, and we're all screwed up. The country's screwed up. Our society is screwed up.
I've never loved this man more than I do right now.
Jump up and,
that's what he's all about. He's always been that way.
Obviously, it didn't happen. Nobody went to see the movie. So that didn't have much of an effect on anybody. American Graffiti was really done as a bet with Francis.
Wait, what?
We had, because of THX, American Zoetrope went bankrupt. And we were all forced to go out and get real jobs. And, well, Francis was.
Wait, Francis, is he talking about Coppola? Okay.
Yeah.
And I'd made one movie that was, basically a hopeless, weird thing. So he went off to do The Godfather. And he said, I dare you to go out and make something completely different, something, a comedy. Do a comedy. No more robots. No more of this cool artistic BS. Do something that's just a thing. Well, as close as I could get to that was this film about my wasted youth. And the only thing that really excited me about was the music track. And so, I had crazy ideas about how I wanted to put this together and make it one night and tell all these characters. So the studios all said, well, this is too weird. It's too much, too experimental. It's not going to work. It's, we don't want it. So years and years went by trying to sell this damn thing. Finally, Francis got done with The Godfather and came back and said, well, I'll put my name on it and that'll sell it, which is the way it got made.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that part of it.
Release it. They said it was terrible, incomprehensible. It wasn't fit to show an audience. Maybe we'll put it on as a movie of the week, but we're certainly not going to release it.
Wow.
Before that, I had this idea of doing a kind of space opera. I actually had two films that were very much the same. One was about an archaeologist, which was a Saturday Night serial, and the other one was a space opera.
I don't know what that one was.
And I picked the space opera because
I wonder.
I started out in college as an anthropologist, and I'd always wanted to take mythology and take the psychological underpinnings and motifs of mythology from all around the world and boil it down into things that seem to resonate everywhere in the world. And I said I could take that concept of the psychological underpinnings of mythology, combine it with the exciting action adventure of a Saturday matinee serial, and that would be kind of a cool movie. And so I went to Flash Gordon rather than Don Winslow of the Navy or all these other things. And when I went to
you're a big fan of Flash Gordon.
I am, obviously.
Said,
Flash.
I finally got David to say, well, okay, we'll finance this script.
Such a big fan of Flash Gordon. I realized I watched it so much I missed out on Night at the Comet, which is a great horror movie from 1984, which I can't believe I ever missed out on because it was right up my alley. But either way.
When I wrote it, they said
they paid him $10,000 to write a screenplay.
Impressive.
And finally, I say when Francis attached his name to it, I got it done at Universal. But it was a real struggle, and I didn't get paid much. So by the time I finished that, I was ready for a job because I had no money whatsoever. So the primary thing was to actually make some money so I could get a thing. So I had this other project. The other thing about American Graffiti was that I finished it like in February. The studio wouldn't release it. They said it was terrible. So what we did was every time somebody from the studio, the TV department, to see if they could put it in television, the marketing department to see if they could figure out a way of that, marketing it. Everybody, whenever
and now it's a cult classic
at Universal, instead of letting them, the three executives, sit in a little room, they got little rooms there, you seat about 12 people. We said, no. And we put them in a room this size. And we invited everybody at the studio, anybody who had friends, anybody to see it. So everybody, they always saw it with a full house. And of course, the screenings we'd had were all, sensational. Everybody just went screaming, yelling, went crazy.
Well, yeah, because if anyone doesn't know, it's not actually a terrible movie.
But
fair enough.
So Al Nat Jr. was one of the.
This is why these two are great to put next to each other. That dry humor.
Yep.
And he was one of the most logical and visionary studio executives I've ever met. And he simply said, look, I love that movie. He said, what do you got? Well, I got a thing. Of course, when I'd gone and made the deal with David Pickard to do American Graffiti, he said, what else you got? I said, well, I got this kind of space opera thing called Soul. Well, we'll take that too. And of course, then it was
Alan, I remember reading about Alan Ledger being so necessary to the movement of Star Wars. Oh, wow.
We'll make more, but we don't think that legally we can get away with more, so we'll just take 3 pictures from you. 7 years of your life. So he said, I don't understand what you're talking about, but I think you're talented, so whatever you want to do is fine with me.
Now, we need more of that from the studios today.
God.
I trust the talent, not the script. I mean, it's just those were the days. They weren't
trust the talent, not the script.
Thin thread of rationality that came into the film industry in the 70s. Really, I mean, it was amazing. And everybody talks about how it happened, but mostly it was because all the moguls had died off. Corporations bought the studios, and everything was in chaos. So you had odd people being hired to run things, and they didn't know about power yet and all that kind of stuff because they weren't getting stock options. So it was like an amazing little time.
Wow.
The long story even longer.
Damn,
Wow.
foreshadowing or what?
Which I actually started writing.
My
the film. It
goodness.
took me 2 years of research with basically mythology and a lot of things. I had taken a lot of mythology when I was in college because of my major. So I distilled it down, wrote a script. I wrote a giant script. The original film was basically subtitled The Tragedy of Darth Vader. And in the
Didn't know
beginning,
that.
Darth Vader comes in and kills everybody. And in the middle, you find out that this kid is actually the son of Darth Vader. And in the end, the son validates, vindicates, and allows the father to be. So that was the movie. But of course, I wrote it was like 250 pages. And I said, well, this ain't going to happen. So even before I turned it into
Right.
Fox,
I was going to say, did you ever show them that?
I never showed him that. I knew enough to know.
Probably.
Look,
That version of the
budget
script
for
is
film at
sitting
that point
somewhere.
was $3 million.
Ah,
So
that would
I
be
knew
the
that wasn't going to happen.
gold mine
So I
to
said,
find.
well, I'll take the first act and I'll make that into a movie. But I swear I will make the other two movies. I'll make this whole thing. I accidentally opened a hornet's nest, but I am actually going to see it all the way through to the end. I mean, I was sitting there writing this with one movie that made, less than $300,000 or $400,000. Another movie that was so bad that it wouldn't even be released. And so I was struggling away writing the screenplay because I was getting paid more actually to write that screenplay than I got to do everything on American Graffiti.
Wow.
What did they say when you gave them the script? When you had your first
I gave them the script. Laddie said, look, I don't understand this. Dogs flying spaceships? What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. But you're a really talented guy. Go ahead and make it.
That's respect.
That's
That's having trust in a creator.
No. I got very lucky. I came out of film school, Francis, and I moved to San Francisco. We never really got involved with the studio system at all. Francis had been involved, and he said, this is enough after Finding Rainbow. He said, I'm never doing this again. And then after I sort of sunk American Zoetrope, he had to come back and work for Paramount to do Godfather, which was really, to be honest with you, one of the most horrific experiences that I've ever seen a director go through in terms of,
Wow.
people trying to, getting kicked off the picture all the time, studio executives that were just involved in everything. He had to fight every single day. They hated the cast, they hated the music, they hated the story, everything he did, they hated. And so he was fighting this huge uphill battle.
So interesting seeing the before and after of this kind of stuff.
He did that,
like what happened with what it looks like nowadays when you look back 40 years.
And this was on The Godfather too.
We started putting it together and figuring out where and how we were going to do it and everything. The one thing they were worried about was the fact that this involved a lot of special effects, and there were no special effects departments at the studios anymore. There were some map painters. There were exactly
Enter ILM.
in the world.
3 map painters. Wow.
And they were all, in their 60s and 70s. And Kubrick had built his own unit, which then turned around and disbanded when he finished. And Doug Trumbull was one of those guys, and he started a little production company that did a lot of commercials and did, and he was trying to get his own little science fiction movie off. But there just wasn't any special effects. So the studio was saying, well, how are you going to make this? When I did THX, the studio asked me the same thing. Well, this is a big science fiction film. How in the world are you going to do this? What are you going to, so I came up with a thing called rotary cam photography. I said, I'm going to do it with rotary cam photography. It's very new. It's going to be special. It'll make it look great. So I took that idea and I told Fox, I said, don't worry. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I started out in film school as an animator, so I knew a little bit about this stuff.
So he basically BS'd the studio.
Right.
We'll do it. So I took all of the money I'd made on American Graffiti and I invested in a special effects company, ILM. And hired all these guys. One was a
small little company.
Yeah. Tiny little firm.
And a bunch of guys that did commercials and did, none of them had ever really made a feature film before. They, and none of them had actually done real special effects except on commercials.
So you had to do that with your own money outside the budget of the film?
Well, I used it to start the company.
Right.
And then obviously ended up billing it back to the effects back to the studio. Francis taught me how to do that.
Absolutely.
He said, the first thing you do when you start a movie is you buy a camera. And then you rent the camera back to the company. Now, unfortunately, all the cameramen have learned this trick, and the sound men. And practically everybody has learned it. So you're going to find when you hire somebody, they're going to be You're going to be renting all the equipment from the people who are making more money renting you the equipment than they get paid.
So, in terms of how you explain to them what you were going to do, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is one of the techniques that's become extremely common for directors, showing the studio what the film is going to be, is conceptual artwork, paintings, that kind of thing. Yes. My understanding is, when you found Ralph McQuarrie and you had him do his paintings, I mean, I don't think anyone had really done that before. So my question would be, well, what?
Yeah, it had been done before. Done in the studios. They had done it like on Gone with the Wind and stuff. William Cameron Menzies had done paintings of what the special effect shots were going to look like.
I only found out recently that Nolan doesn't storyboard.
So it wasn't unheard of.
Yeah, I found that recently myself too. I forgot he
again,
did
had to
too,
do
so
it on
old
my
school.
own
But yeah, not at all.
I
That's
hated
cool
it
though.
much, and
Whatever works for him is it works, obviously.
basically just represented me. I developed my own little mixing room. I had my own editing room. I had, but it was all in San Francisco, and it was all real funky. We did show them that. The one thing that we did break through on that film is I had all these really big action set pieces. I couldn't really explain what I wanted to do with storyboards. I didn't really believe in storyboards because storyboards are great.
Another similarity between the two.
Static.
Yeah.
This was the shot, and sometimes in animation,
Absolutely.
back in those days, it was just everything was on a proscenium. You just did it and you painted the picture and said that's what it is. You didn't have to do extremely complex things. So what I did on Star Wars is I took a lot of old documentary films of air battles from World War II, and I cut them into the sequences.
I just want to take a second to shout out NIsmaland, which is where we're watching the video from. They had uploaded it to YouTube, but we're watching it from there. So NIsmaland, if you want to go subscribe and the link and everything there, that'd be great. Appreciate it. We don't look like we're profiting off of them in any way, shape, or form. So thank you for uploading this, NIsmaland.
Classes with the screenwriting professor, saying, character is bullshit. Story doesn't mean anything. That's for the theater. That's for book. That's not for cinema. Cinema is the art of the moving image. You are eviscerating this whole art form with your kind of reproducing other mediums and other art forms. So I was really not a real fan of writing, which is ironic because most of what I do now is writing. But so when it got to that part of it, I knew that
people have been telling George Lucas he doesn't know what he's talking about since the very beginning.
I knew still drawings could tell.
They still are sometimes.
I had to do it in terms of motion, and I knew that the secret behind what I was doing in terms of visual effects by that time, the one thing I grabbed onto was that as opposed to Stanley Kubrick, who has got 1 2-minute shots in his film, where the thing just sits there and the ship sort of slowly cruises. But you can see
he does it a lot faster,
on that, and it's perfect. So
yeah,
I said, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do shots that are only about 12 frames, 32 frames at the most, and it'll move by so fast that you won't see the matte lines, and you won't see, how it's put together. It'll just be a razzle dazzle of visual fantasy.
Well, let me ask, because I asked my boys, whether they had any questions. One of the questions was, how do you do the spaceships flying and all the rest? And I thought, well, it's the obvious question after you watch Star Wars, because for those of us seeing it for the first time as kids, it was completely mind-blowing and exciting. And I guess, did you have any films you could point to other than 2001 was extremely slow?
It's amazing how much how far we come, and that's not even talked about anymore, really. Like what a breakthrough it was.
And I was a big Kurosawa fan. So
yeah, Kurosawa.
Seven Samurai had actually more of an effect, even though telling the story from the point of view of the lowliest servants came from Hidden Fortress. But
I was going to say, I always thought Hidden Fortress was the big influence. I never thought about Seven Samurai.
In that period, that was a movie that was
both, I guess, in a way. I can see a little bit of both.
Very fast, very. And so I had become obsessed with the kinetic nature of film, and most of my student films were very kinetic. A lot of very fast cutting and that sort of thing. And I went on.
So I'm loving seeing the similarities between the two. 2001 is also Nolan's favorite movie.
So I figured I'd just
makes sense.
And we would make this really fast stuff, and if a shot didn't work or something, we'd just put a big boom there, and they'd blink their eyes, and they would go away. You could fake it, which is what basically I did then. And we had to, in order to do that, we also
Fake it till you make it.
We had no technology to do what
Right.
we were doing. And so I started as an animator. I really started as a cameraman. Then when I went to film school, I started as an animator. And we came up with this idea of basically taking an animation stand and hooking it on rails and on a camera and putting the model there and using it just like a animation stand. But an animation stand relies on precisionally machined parts so that everything is exactly the same. So it really became a thing of metalworking and, making a precision thing that would move down a track and keep the same move every time. And also link it to computers, which was the first.
And then you have Nolan's guy who carries around a giant IMAX camera on his shoulder.
Right.
We'll just do it that way. And without that, we could never have done it.
If Nolan were filming it himself, would he still do that? That's what I want to know.
Very, very short shots.
Have you seen those IMAX cameras? They're huge.
Basically a model on a stick with a camera moving past it, and then doing the same thing on the star.
What's fascinating is the innovation, and that's what's, I don't want to say it's missing. You talk about the volume, they can do so much with the volume, and I love the volume for what it does. At the same time, you go back to like back in the day when they didn't have the volume, they had to like companies inventive ways to make things work, and it's become a thing of amazing innovation, and George is right behind a lot of that. So it's just really cool to hear about.
Had this horrendous, what was it like?
I mean, that's essentially what George is saying there. Like, you don't really get innovation like that too much anymore.
Which is like, I guess it is a drawback, I guess, to the things like the volume and technology, it being what it is. I mean, there's definitely positives too. I'm not going to sit here like an old man going, "Oh, it's better back in the day," but like there's some things
the studio said we got to cut 5 minutes out of it.
You said, well, we'll get to that.
Yeah, but on this one, it was literally that I came back from shooting, having a miserable experience, and ILM hadn't shot one shot. They had spent half the budget. It was 6 months later. We only had 6 months to go before the film was going to be released. We had 800 shots, and there wasn't one that I'd accepted.
Ooh.
Wow.
And I was
thought
this was not going to work.
Right.
I had walked out and stood up and realized that I'd painted myself in a corner and I didn't know what to do.
So all of the ILM stuff got put into place as you were going into production, or even before?
Yeah, as soon as I started writing, and as soon as they said, okay, they accepted the script. So as soon as I started pre-production, I started ILM. So they were working, and we had to build the whole thing, and we had to build the cameras from scratch, and we had to build, and I'd hired a couple of those guys before that just to start figuring out the technology, how we would do it. And I had Ralph McQuarrie doing drawings of what I wanted everything to look like, because again, you can't read the script and understand what I'm talking about. It has to be a picture.
Right.
What does a Wookiee look like? What do the spaceships look like?
Yeah.
All that stuff had to be figured out ahead of time. There was a lot of design work that had to be done, but also I deliberately wrote Star Wars to be within the realm of technology and within the realm of how I could make it at a reasonable price.
Right.
So I was pushing the envelope with one thing.
Studios take note how it can be done with a reasonable price.
And imagine that, man.
Because I was really obsessed with the kinetic energy of a pan. And I said, if I could just put a pan in a spaceship, it'll really make this thing jump. But obviously it was at that point impossible. So that I had to accomplish, but everything else I knew I could do. And it's designed for no costumes, for no costume changes. There's a lot of tricks in that movie that are done, to cut costs way down. And I wrote it with all that stuff in mind. So that it was like, oh yeah, we can, I'll save on costumes by doing this. And
it really doesn't play like a movie that somebody's decided to shrink their vision.
Yeah, but if you look at it, when you really look at the thing, it really is, it takes place in the desert and it takes place on a Death Star. That's it. And it's like real easy.
Well, then here's my question. If given that pragmatism, given that, okay, now we're going to go make this film, whatever. You've got a desert, you've got a Death Star. Why did you start in the desert? Like, why did you, the first time I think C3 put his costume on, you're in the middle of 110-degree heat in Tunisia. I mean, it just seems a very, very difficult way to start.
We're movie directors. We're nuts. When have you ever thought of a movie director that has enough common sense to get out of the rain or the heat?
That's fair.
All crews know that.
That's absolutely
My
fair.
movie is everything.
I love this.
Guys
I
are
like
nuts.
seeing this more human side of George.
Yeah.
Well, the things I wanted to do.
Well, it's great getting a conversation between someone that like knows what that is. Like, it's not just a director; it's a director talking to a fellow director. So George and Chris knows what he's talking about. So you can get this more of a connection that way.
There's like a mutual respect
Yeah.
between the two.
Of immaculate realism, which is something I learned from Kurosawa, which was to say, even though this is a ridiculous story, and it's obviously has no reality in it whatsoever, I wanted to make a world that looked like it had been lived in, that had logic on every level, that every cultural artifact, every set piece had a reason for being there. It wasn't just sort of willy-nilly.
That's
And
Kurosawa.
obviously, everything had to be designed. And of course, a lot of it in that one was sort of designed around things we could get our hold of and find. There was a lot of found design. You know, we were using, things like egg beaters for ray guns and stuff like that. So there's a lot of cheating going on in that movie.
That inner child.
I remember when the drawings are first in the
Funny,
sand.
well, that is exactly it. Like, it's because when you're a kid, you play with whatever you can find. It's kind of the big kids version of that.
I mean, Ridley Scott, I've read about him talking about how much he was influenced by that when he then went to Alien and Blade Runner. Just the idea, and it seems in retrospect a simple idea, that things would age in science fiction as opposed to being perfect. But I don't think it had ever been done.
I'm pretty sure it hadn't. It was pretty shocking when I did it because everybody thought space, science fiction, it's all clean and perfect. But
that was a big deal. That was a big deal.
It was used and dirty, and there was water running marks down the walls and all kinds of details. Robots that didn't work. For whatever reason, my relationship with technology has always been a little bit. I mean, I started out building cars, so it all comes from the point of view of working in a garage where you work on broken cars. And I tell my son how lucky he is now. But in those days, we drove, to the next town. If I lived in Desktop, if I drove to San Francisco, there was pretty much like a 25% chance that you wouldn't make it. That the car would break somewhere along the line, or you get a flat tire, but you just basically wouldn't get there, and you'd have to stop and call 3A or fix the car yourself or do whatever. But now, cars are almost invincible. But in those days, cars were sort of like computers are today, where they don't always do what you tell them to do.
As someone who used to drive around in an old 78 Mini Mayfair.
Did they embrace that philosophy? Did you have to convince them? Was it...
John Barry in the art department. John Barry was a really fantastic art director, really, really great guy. He put together an art department, prop guys, the whole little group. They were completely and 100% on my side, and very, very supportive of me in every possible way. And no matter how wacky I got, they would go along with it, and they came up with other things. They actually contributed a lot by bringing things in, even because again, it's one of those things where the design work in Star Wars, and especially as it goes on to all the other ones, is huge. I mean, it's beyond anything that anybody can imagine. It takes at least 3 years, and 7 or 8 guys now. I mean, I have a permanent design department, just does nothing but design stuff. We had to do that much work, and while I was writing the script, I had the designers working, designing stuff. Even when that was the first people I put on. It was like Ralph McQuarrie, and then we put on more guys, Joe Johnston, and a few people, and I had designers working the whole time I was writing the script for those 2 years.
Look like designing while he's writing. I love it.
Yeah. It's like, maybe Lord of the Rings, but we kind of know there's forests and whatnot, but there are very few movies that involve.
Confirmed, George hates Lord of the Rings as much as I do.
Something like Star Wars.
I believe he said he liked it. He said design-wise, though, it was definitely more.
Say, well, we'll work on these 3 little things.
Yeah, basis of reality.
Car, and this is a building, and this is a boat. Well, you know what those are. This is a fork. You know what that is. And you can just sort of figure it out. But with this, everything was open. The cultures were open. The aliens were open. That was a very hard part of it. But that film is as much visually done and as much visual work as written work.
Well, and even though
Totally.
you know,
That's a good point.
costume
That's like a
design,
very visual thing. It's like you can't,
costumes are
without seeing it, doesn't really have the same
operated on
impact.
stormtroopers, and there's so many
Obviously,
iconic things there. How
Just
much of that came
bring that
from the
comparison to
the
from
original
page to
conceptual work
screen.
when you wrote the script? How much was John Mollo, you know, in the normal pre-production phase when you're there sort of trying to do fittings and things? Yeah.
What usually happens in this case, and it happened in that case too, is I work with the designers and we just design what we want or what I want. And I just go, no, make it like this, make it like, combine those two things like this, and I get a design that I like. And so that's where the designs basically came from. Then I turn it over to the costume designer, which is somebody like John Marlowe. And I say, okay, now make these. Figure out how to do that. And in that case, it was make it for no money.
You know, Nolan's just
So
like
it was very
taking
hard,
all of this in, and
and
he's
we were
just like,
constantly sort of,
I'm using
finessing
all these little like
looks like.
tidbits and little pointers. Nolan's taking them all and being like, I'm using that. I'm using that.
They're
No.
molded plastic.
He's
I
definitely
recommend
fascinated
John
by it.
Barry, who
I mean, he's well into his career. This is his own way of working, but he's still definitely listening to how he did it back in the day.
you know, was like a new thing, vacuum forming. Right. Getting a vacuum form machine was like a big deal. You know, we got like the only one in England. It came from some, I don't know what factory, but we just grabbed it. And we also did another kind of vacuum forming, which John designed the sets. I mean, Ralph kind of designed what they look like, but then John took those designs and made them into panels. So he made 4x8 panels, which is kind of like sheets of plywood, and they were, you know, they were made out of some kind of fiberglass mold thing that they had created, but they were vacuum formed, and you know, they had all this work on them, you know, depth and things because they were about that thick, but they were just basically a piece of molded fiberglass, really. And he built all the sets out of this stuff. It was just he just made thousands of them, and they build a set. They just say okay, and they put up a little wood frame and they nail this stuff to it, and we build a set. It was amazing.
Sweet DIY, I love it.
Even the spaceships were done that way. You know, the opening spaceship is all vacuum formed. You know, it was a whole different approach to building sets.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was one of the ways we got it done. You know, really was by figuring out new ways to accomplish things and new, you know, just operational things that we could get away with, so we didn't have to spend. And the whole thing depended on, as I said, look, I'm going to pan around, so I'll never see this stuff. So just, you know, build it to stand up for a minute, and we'll shoot it. And if it doesn't look like it, we'll just throw it out.
Build it so it stands for a minute.
But that was
No, it doesn't look well thrown out of
the irony
focus.
of
I
that
love
movie was it was designed to be seen once on a big screen.
it.
That way I could get away with everything. I had no idea there would be things called DVDs. I had no idea, you know.
I don't think it's even DVDs. I mean, I saw Star Wars in movies 12 times.
Yeah.
And there was nothing unusual about that. I mean, when it came out, every birthday party, 2 years, you all went to see Star Wars. You know, that was just, I mean, literally. But
I'll say there was one thing which is also part of it was that I made it a very rich environment, very rich frame. There's
very
a
dense.
lot of detail in a frame,
Yeah.
a lot of busy stuff. And by doing that, one, it's distracting. But I did
Smoke
it
and
because I
mirrors.
said, look, I'm going to assume
Fugazi.
you've been here. This is just like, you know, shooting Batman. You know,
Well,
you know what New York
no one
looks
wants
like.
that.
Sort of looks like Gotham. Gotham looks, you know, just okay, fine cars, whatever. We've been there before. We knew what this was like. So I didn't stop for anything, and I didn't hold on my map paintings.
Right.
You know, I said, you know, Death Star. We've all seen Death Star. There's Death Star. You don't have to linger on it. Just as if it were the Empire State Building. You know, just okay, that's fine. But they used to, you know, map painting costs so much money that it's inevitable the studio and the director and everybody wants to put it on there for a long time. Said, look, this really costs a lot of money. We're going to show you how great we are. And I said, no. And everybody went crazy. Said, you put all that money in a map painting and you literally let it be on there for 32 seconds. I mean, 32 frames. That's crazy. But it works because that's why a lot of people went back and because they couldn't get it all the first time. Everybody said, my gosh, that's so fast. The pace is so fast. You can't, you know, if you look at that movie, well, you're going to see it tonight. It's not fast. In those days, it was so fast. And it was fast because you didn't know what anything was.
Mm.
So you were busy trying to take it all in.
It's a good point, like familiarity versus the non-familiarity.
You do know what all that stuff is. You're very familiar with it. You grew up with it, just like the Empire State Building. So the movie has got a normal kind of, I wouldn't say lackadaisical pace, but it's a normal pace of a movie.
Well, I think it's partly because movies have changed since it. I mean, I think editing and everything has greatly influenced, and people having more faith in audiences being able to take in things very quickly with quick cuts. But I wanted to just go back to costumes for a second, because one of the other questions I was asked by my boys to ask is Darth Vader half human?
My boys like that.
And that made me think about, okay, the first time you come to see Star Wars, and I can
It's a good question.
How is it that we know that C-3PO is a robot, Stormtrooper is a human being, and Darth Vader is whatever it is? They're all, actors, performers in, molded suits, and the film never in any way sort of attempts to explain anything. Somebody's a robot, somebody's not. So how is it we know that, and how did you have the confidence that audiences would just figure that out?
Again, part of this also comes from Kurosawa, which is when I first saw Seven Samurai, it was in film school. I come from a very small town in the middle of California. I'd never seen a Japanese film, a foreign film.
Where did he go with this?
I wasn't interested in movies. I sort of fell into film when I got to film school. I didn't even know there was such a thing as going to college to learn how to make movies, and that's completely absurd to me. But the idea of being an anthropology professor, I was interested in the thing, but I was more wanted to go to art center and be an illustrator or something. But this combined all that stuff. I love photography, so I said, okay, I'll do that. The Kurosawa thing is I saw a Kurosawa film there for the first time. My friend John Milius was a Kurosawa freak, and he showed me a lot of Kurosawa films, and I saw Seven Samurai, and that was the first feudal Japanese film I'd ever seen. So I had no idea what I was looking at. I mean, it was completely incomprehensible to me. I'd never seen that period of Japan in my life. I missed that. So I was saying, what in the hell is going on? Who are these people, and why are they doing them? They're talking about all kinds of things didn't have any idea what they were talking. I mean, it was in Japanese, but at the same time, even in English, it didn't make any sense. Because there were all these, traditions and things that I just, I said, this is so fascinating just on the watching a strange culture that you'd have no idea what it is. Just the fascinating part of it. The psychology part, which is to go strange places and watch people.
A bit of baffling with bullshit a little bit. Not that it's bullshit, but.
So I decided to take that concept and put it in Star Wars. I said, hey, I could watch what I was looking at, but I enjoyed it, even though I didn't know what they were doing. So
I like that.
And I will give enough clues.
It's very much so just go, it's the story of his career. Just trust me, just go with it.
It was only 2 hours.
Right.
A lot of that would make sense.
Let him cook.
Everything would be
Let him cook.
I'll let him cook.
9 years to do it. When the people first saw Darth Vader, they didn't know what he was. Is he a monster? Is there a guy in there? Is it a robot? They didn't know who he was. He was just the villain. He was the villain.
That's what I saw him as. I just saw him as the bad guy.
Same with me, yeah.
I didn't have any idea that any of this would work, or that it would have the impact that it did. You just don't think that way. You just do your best job, and it comes out. And that, more than anything, in the end, made me do the first 3 movies. Because I had this whole backstory, because I wanted to start with episode 4. I wanted to insert them, come in, hadn't seen the first. Again, same idea. You're coming in, it's like a television series, like 24. I don't know what's happened before. What's going on? Who are these people? And if you don't come in the first episode, you come in the 5th episode. So I wanted that kind of throw you right into the middle of something you don't have any idea about. But then later on, I realized that the tragedy got lost in that. And if I told the backstory, which was obviously written before the actual film, that it would make more sense. You start out as a nice little kid, and he actually wanted as a nice guy, and he turned bad.
And shot the whole film in England, stages there. What led you to England?
I said, well,
English-centric.
One
question from Nolan.
Shoot on the soundstage, like a real movie. Because I was a guy that shot on the street for a few $100,000, and that's where I was. And I said, well, I'm going to go back to doing these abstract art films. But before I do that, I sort of got myself wrapped into this, regular traditional movie thing. I won a scholarship to go work at Warner Brothers for 6 months, as an observer.
Yeah.
I'll never work here, but I should see what it's all about, this Hollywood thing. And then I got mixed up with Francis, and then we fled Hollywood, and I was kind of on the fringes, but I was kind of making, regular movies. I said, I want to make one that has, big cameras and sound stages and all that stuff. But I live in San Francisco, and we didn't have any of the, there's a huge infrastructure you need to do that. Well, to be very honest with you, down here, the studios mostly are filled with television. So it's very hard to get, I needed like 11 sound stages. And it's like, they didn't have 11 sound stages down here to spare. They were all television.
Wow.
London had great talent. They had great actors. They had, a plaster shop.
And why'd you make us all Imperials, George?
Everywhere. They had good carpenters.
Because he's jealous.
To do a film like this is really hard. So you needed all the craft.
Maybe.
Yeah,
And England, other than Hollywood, is the only place that really had, first.
Because the British accent just sounds evil, Matty. That's what it is. The British accent sounds evil.
Yeah,
Plus,
you're not wrong.
plus local boys.
You're not wrong.
They sold Elstree, which is where I was, and they turned it over from having a staff to having independent guys come in and work. And as a result, I was able to get a great deal, save a lot of money, and
so shrewd. I love it.
To go anywhere in the world,
He's a brilliant man, brilliant businessman too. We don't really see that. I mean, sometimes, they do see that now, but I don't think they see to the depth of what he did as far as that goes. Everything, every decision he made had some kind of financial reason, and not a bad way, just a way to make everything work for give him the best bang for his buck.
This is actually what it costs.
It's like the merchandise deal. Disney were like, you're not going to sell merchandise for Star Wars. Boy, you're wrong.
I don't believe it. There's actually a real thing behind it. There's actually that guy gets paid that much an hour, and he's got to work that many days, and that's what it's going to cost you. And I can't make it any less. We gave him a budget for $9,999,000.99, and I said, I don't think it'll come in at that, but we did it anyway. It came up $14 million. Because that was what it actually cost to do it.
Right.
Working in England, I mean, one of the things, I made films in England, and my experience there was very much the crews, when you're starting out there, they're very suspicious. They're very sort of like, okay, let's see what you can do, see who you are. There's not a sort of, there's a bit of
that intrigue.
What have you got kind of thing for a director over there.
Right.
Imagine going
Interesting.
These crazy costumes and these crazy sets. There would have been a lot of skepticism, frankly.
Well, there was. I have one question for you. Did you have an English accent when you went over there?
No, I think it's
you sound like an Englishman. Of course, they would say, "Oh, yeah, you dress like an Englishman."
I dress like an Englishman. I sound like an Englishman. It doesn't help at all. It's about what have you done before? There's a very sort of like, okay.
You can imagine what I was.
Good.
I had long hair, I had a beard. I was 29 years old, and their industry was sort of crumbling a little bit, and I walked in there, and
that was funny.
I had this really crazy script, which they all, the entire crew was 100% against me, except for the art department. They were the only guys that stuck by me through the whole movie, and it was horrible. In those days, you worked really from 8 in the morning until 5:30 at night, and that was it. You could not, unless the crew voted, you could not work past 5:30.
Yeah. Working time directive.
Wow.
But you could take what they call the quarter. So if you were in the middle of a shot, you could actually finish that shot. They give you 15 minutes in the quarter to finish the shot.
Because you're limited over here. You're limited to 7.5 hours per day.
They would. I was on the studio. They would basically at 5:30. They'd shut off. It was run on generators. They just flipped the switch, and that was the end of it. And you had to get the crew to vote. Well, the AD was way against me. The cameraman was way against me, and every time they would say no. No matter how the vote went, they'd always look to them first. They'd say no, and then everybody would vote no. Except the art department would vote yes, but of course they were outnumbered. So I had to get it done at 5:30 every night.
Wow.
It was and that was the least of it. But that was, they just had no idea, and they were very, they basically thought the film was stupid. Which, if you read it, it sort of reads kind of stupid. But
At least you can admit
we
that.
had this big 7-foot thing walking around the set, and and guys, and green guys with long snouts, and they thought it was a very bad version of Doctor Who. So
when you've got Darth Vader without James Earl Jones's voice, you've got, I guess, Dave Prowse doing the dialogue through. Probably not the same impact.
That was one of those things where, he had a very northern England accent, which is
Hey, mate.
almost Cockney. It's just very, very thick and ridiculous for a movie. And he
Cockney Vader.
I hired him because he was big. I just needed a big guy, and he was in Clockwork Orange. He was this giant guy, and I said, well, this will work. I needed somebody who was like close to like 6'7",
Right,
8, 9 there, and I always was going to replace his voice. I was going to replace Anthony Daniels' voice. All the people that you didn't see, I was going to replace their voices over here with Americans. Because again, I was making an American film in England, and most of my actors were English. So except for the key people I brought over, and of course the union wouldn't let them come in the country, and we did get in reasonably easy on that movie. But when we went back to do Empire, they wouldn't let him in at all. This is a sequel.
oh wow.
These are people that are in the other movie. We already hired them. There's only 3 American actors coming in on a movie with 250 actors. You're going to not have.
That's why.
Wow.
Anyway, well, it got done.
I never knew that.
So
I never did that
then
either.
you go back to the States and you see no shots from Ireland after a year's work and half the budget. Presumably,
I love how the captions say no shots from Ireland.
Well, it was worse than that. I had shot the film. At the very end, the only thing Laddie ever did do was, at the very end of shooting, I was 2 weeks over schedule, and I was going to go another 2 weeks to finish it, because I had to finish the whole beginning of the movie, where they come into the ship and Darth Vader comes in, does all that stuff. And I had to shoot that, and with our 2 3PO. And he said, look, you got to finish it. You got to finish it in 1 week. And
1 week.
They haven't even finished building the set yet. He said, well, you've got to finish it in 1 week. I said, I can do it, but it means everybody goes on overtime to build the set and to shoot it. And I'm going to have 5 crews. 5 4-second units.
Right.
And that's going to cost you twice as much if you just give me the extra 2 weeks.
Right.
And he said, I don't care. You got to get it done. And
Wow.
the reality of making movies comes in, which is later after I finished the movie, and I started talking to members of the board and stuff, that I realized that the board had given him an ultimatum, that he'd have to go and face the board. This was with Fox. He was the head of the studio, but he basically, the board of directors was making every single decision. Of course, they were stockbrokers and people didn't know anything about movies.
Some things never change, huh?
Absolutely.
He said, you will not come back here to the board meeting, which is on Monday. I was going to be finished on Friday. He said, you will not come back here and have that movie still shooting. So he said, look, let's get it done.
So you got it done.
But then I was cutting it together. I had a editor who I respected. He'd done some great movies. He'd worked for Richard Lester, who I admired. And I was an editor. And I was looking at this stuff. God, I'm doing such a terrible job. This stuff is not going together. It's not working. It's terrible. What in the world is going on here? This is just, it's bad. So I went in on a weekend and I started recutting the movie myself. And I started looking, I said, well, and I could see that every cut I was making was like 12 frames off. A lot of the angles and a lot of the performances were off. And I said, well, this isn't going to work. So I fired the editor. This was about halfway through shooting. And I said, well, I'll just finish it when I get back. I'm not going to be able to hire another editor now, and I only got 6 weeks, and let's just get it over with. Came back here. I had no editors. I immediately hired 2 assistants to put the whole movie back together in dailies. Just completely.
Wow.
Put the trims back.
Nothing. I had nothing. So I came
That's
back.
crazy.
I had dailies. I had no special effects. It was August. The movie was coming out in May.
Whew. That's
In the
amazing.
hospital.
Yeah.
But
I remember reading that,
So
hearing
did you
that.
go-
Yeah.
I mean, with ILM, you went down there. You started. Really
I started
sitting
going down
on
twice
it.
a week,
Mhm.
and I spend 3 days up north, 2 days at LA, flying back and forth all the time. That was when the airline was PSA, which I don't know if anybody remembers. That was probably before your time, but they had, PSA was an airline that flew like every half hour. It was like a train, and it was literally. You see the posters. They still, if you do a period film, put a PSA poster. They had girls in miniskirts, but it was $13.95 to get from San Francisco to LA.
Wow. Excellent.
So those were the days.
Now, I read somewhere. I don't know.
Wait,
if it's true, that
$14 to get from LA to San Francisco.
Damn.
that
That was a little kiss.
You were somewhat dissatisfied still. I was just curious about that because to those of us watching it, and as everyone will see in a minute, tonight, it's unbelievably mind-blowing how great the visual effects are.
Well, I fooled. Actually, I fooled myself because now that you can see it frame by frame, and everybody, you can go on the internet and there'll be a whole website devoted to one frame of the movie, analyze 6 ways from Sunday, and I realized that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And when I went to do the special edition, which was,
Oh God.
we were going to re-release the picture, and I said, we discovered there was no print. We did a 3-strip in order to preserve it. Fox had never bothered to strike a print because it was $50,000, so they never looked at it. So when I went to retrieve it from the salt mines, the cyan was completely out of sync with everything else. There was nothing to do about it. It was just worthless. So I had to go to Poland and Czechoslovakia and stuff and start putting things together, and then making a digital master, that where I could clean up the dirt, the grain, and all that stuff. And then, and I wanted to put back some of the things that I'd never been able. By that time, by Star Wars, I had gone back to I'd gone back to THX. The studio had cut 5 minutes out of the movie. I said, I'm putting that. I went to them and I said, I want my 5 minutes back. This was before VHS. But I just said, I want the film to be the way I originally intended the film to be. THX, it really didn't make any difference. I mean, it's like, for God's sake, it's so abstract. What difference is 5 minutes going to make? But American Graffiti, there were some very sort of, to me, pivotal scenes that they cut out. And just for the same reason that they cut out THX. Well, we can do it, so we will. And I was furious.
It's one of the dangers that they're looking at now, huh?
Yeah.
In a situation like that, you're basically screwed. And I was extremely pissed and bitter. And but when I Star Wars, I came back and I said, I want my 5 minutes back. So I got my 5 minutes back in there. So then when I was moving along to, by this time I'd already done Empire and stuff. This was sort of before I decided to even do prequels. And I was looking at the movies and I said, it needs to be, we need to get a good print. So we looked and realized there was no good print available anywhere.
Damn. None at all.
For the possibility of a reissue.
Right. That's
we started
insane.
working on it. I said, well, I want to put the Jabba the Hutt scene back in because, I basically, ILM, we had to create the Jabba the Hutt part. And we just had a guy in a
Oh yeah, I remember that.
furry vest.
They just had the dude. Yeah.
Furry Jabba the Hutt. But
Furry Jabba the Hutt.
it was just too much for him. I mean, there's no way they were going to get that finished. And various other little, matte lines. I want to get rid of all the matte lines because I hated the matte lines. And digitally, we can get rid of them. So I said, I'm going to make it the way I wanted it to be.
Right.
I intended it to be. So that's, in the end, you want the movie to be the way you intended it. When I intended it, I had this vision of what I wanted. Well, from that day on, it just got compromised.
Right.
You know, in the script,
Mm.
you know, 'cause the worst
That's
thing
the
about
way it
being
is.
a writer is you can't blame anybody. You're the crew.
It's really a
Once
fascinating
you get started to
thing
shoot,
about
you can't
directors
blame
from
anybody.
that time where they got like the
The
whole American
studio
Zoetrope
sort of
type
blames
thing,
me
getting
for the
directors
people
together to
that
have their own
press for the
quote unquote
that
studio
screwed you up.
where they
Yeah.
could just have their own creative whims
You know, and I
be fulfilled by
wrote
however they
fucking
want to
script
do
and
it.
I couldn't, you know, I was having all kinds of
It's
issues
probably
and
a
problems.
better way to do it.
Yeah.
Cut the studios
And
out.
when
Of
I
course,
made
it's
it, and
it's
with
where the money is
Ireland,
always
and with
it's always the great
everything else,
American dollar at that point.
Yeah.
by the time I got
That's always the thing with going, even in like music, going independent. You can get,
Because we have to wrap
Yeah.
up now. And
you
I
can
think so
put
many
music
people
out
talk about
7 ways for Sunday, but if no one hears it,
just so many. But,
Right.
People need to see the film and get going with that. But
Oh,
I
they've
just
all
want
seen it.
they want to see it again. And I want to ask one last thing, which is, at what point then, when you were editing the film, at what point, what screening was it where you finally realized this was going to work? This was going to be something special.
I never realized it.
Really?
I
mm,
finished it, and you know, I was,
sign of a true artist.
again, I was
You're never satisfied with your
Right.
work.
3 years of
Right.
my life, blood, you know, and everything was going wrong all the time, and everything was sort of half of what I was hoping it would be. You know, it's like when you finish the day and you said, "Shit, that didn't go well," you know? And then you cut it together and you say, "Well, maybe we can save it by doing this, and maybe we can do." So it was all like that, and I showed it a early version which still had all of the you know, World War II footage in it and everything, which I showed to a bunch of my friends, which I'd done on all my movies. I invited them to come and see it. I mean, just, you know, a little screening at the house. And, you know, there was like 12 of them, and they all, some of them were very vocal, like, "Oh my God, what have you done?" Some of them were, by their personalities and the kind of movies, they're all directors and writers. So, you know, some of them that are a little hard were saying, "What's all this force shit? You can't make a movie like that, for God's sake."
So this bullshit.
And but he helped me. You know, I had a roll up at the head that was about twice as long as it was. He said, "You're never going to make that. Like, let me help you write a new roll up here." So even though he was, you know, he makes horror movies, so he being Brian De Palma.
Wow.
And, you know, if you don't
got
cut
a name.
if you don't cut somebody open, have blood splattering everywhere, he just thinks it's a wussy film. But he's a good friend, and he really wanted it to work. The only one that believed in it was Steve Spielberg. He's the only one.
Right?
He's the one that said, "This is going to be the biggest film in the history of movies." And everybody looked at him like, "Are you out of your mind?" He said, "No, I believe it. I'm telling you." And they all thought he was completely nuts, and I did too, actually. So I didn't believe anything he said. So in those days,
That's
stereo and monaural, where you had to do two separate mixes. So I had done the stereo mix, which is what it was first released on, and then I was busy doing the monaural mix. I was just finishing it the night the movie came out, and so I was working at night over at Goldwyn, and I was, you know, mixing at night, and Laddie called me and said, "It's a hit! It's a hit!" You called me about 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. Said, "It's a hit! My God, we sold out in every theater. This is fantastic." I said, "Laddie, you guys have done Planet of the Apes. You know that science fiction movies always do well in the first weekend because they're all the fans. I mean, they'll do it well. You know,
Right.
It's not a hit until the fourth week. You call me on the fourth week and tell me it's working."
Excellent, and I'm sure he did. We're going to have to leave it there.
Awesome.
Lucas, thank you very much
Awesome.
for coming. This has been a real pleasure.
All right. Get rid of that. But yeah, wow, that was a great. That was really a great interview, or a conversation, really more than an interview. I like hearing George's insights on a lot of things. Some things I've heard before, some things I hadn't heard before. But it's interesting getting Christopher Nolan's insight onto that as well. I just love George talking with fellow directors. It's just the same animal talking about it. I'd love to get a conversation between Lucas and Spielberg. To be honest with you, that would be a really cool kind of way to get things going. But yeah, I appreciate it. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I'm convinced that Nolan's the man for the job. I think he if it wasn't going to be, I think if we're talking about who could have been the heir apparent to George, if it wasn't going to be Filoni, I feel like it would have been Nolan.
Nolan definitely a good side of things, absolutely. And I would love to see a Nolan film on Star Wars. Like I'll pitch it now, like I was going to pitch before. I kind of would like to see him tackle on the beginnings of the Sith, the beginnings of the Jedi and the Sith, the warfare kind of thing. Kind of him tackle that kind of thing. Maybe even do like what he does best with time. Like maybe he'll pitch back into like the Mangold days of the Dawn of the Jedi, but like more into like the current times with the Sith. It could be really cool to see him tackle that kind of beginning of the Jedi Sith War. Love to see that. Great stuff, though. Wonderful stuff. I want to shout out again NIsmaland. NIsmaland is where we watched that video from. They had uploaded it's a conversation that took place on February 19th, 2011, the DGA 75th anniversary celebration. Once again, a great conversation, George Lucas, on the impact of Star Wars with Christopher Nolan. Wonderful. So that's going to do it for this week, folks.
For everyone saying, what would George Lucas do?
There you go.
We got a bit more of an insight.
This is actually a lot of fun. I have to do this more often, try to find some like outtakes and things like that we can kind of react to. Kind of interesting way to go about things. But yeah, that's it. Where can folks find you, Matty?
You can find me on Instagram at Matty_Gunner. You can find me on Twitter, Matty Gunner. You can find my band Mourner, MOURNER, all DSPs. And you can find me here every Wednesday for Holy Snokes.
There you go. You can find me at PLD Products on Threads, at Paul_Denuzio on the Twitter, on X, as it were. I'm going to say X now, right? Is that what it is? You can also find me on a lot of shows on this channel. All of the show we do review, talking about V. We do 2 Meter White Dudes on Film. We're going to break into the Friday the 13th series now, back to our horror roots at me and PJ. Going to talk about Crown Jewels, which this week's episode is the Brian May led Long Away. U.S. single, but nowhere else. Didn't do very well here, but that's okay. Still a fun song. Let's see what else we got. We got the Harrisons made its debut recently. Episode 2 should be coming up by the end of the month. I think that's all of it for now. If I'm missing something, it's always on the page. It was always on the page. Check it out. And if you do like what you saw here, subscribe, leave comments, and like always, if you can do more, patreon.com/PLD Projects. You can join such people as Austin Cadell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Kearns, Brendan Buckingham, Jeff Altman. You really help keep the lights on. I really appreciate you guys for all that you do. You really do. Your support means everything to me and us, the page here, or at the channel here. We really do appreciate it. Next week, we got another episode coming up. We got a couple, only 2 more episodes until the big Ahsoka premiere happens. So that's coming up faster than I thought it was going to come. No, I mean, I knew it was coming, but it still feels like a lot faster than I thought it was going to be. I think next week, of course, do our news tidbits and everything else, but I think the meat of the show will be 5 favorite Ahsoka episodes or whatever, or maybe arcs. We'll hammer it down exactly, but we'll kind of do 5 episodes in that. Maybe the week after that, we'll do 5 favorite Rebels storylines, whatever, to lead us into what is basically Rebels Season 5 with the Ahsoka series. But yeah, that's next week. So, but of course, until then, as always, may the Force be with you. Always.